Welcome to Ideological. My name is Zach Lee, and we've got an exciting episode on the show today. I've got a special guest, a retired Navy SEAL named Randy Rozzell. Randy, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very excited about this. Randy is the man in this space. Before we jump in, I want to just give you a second where you can just kind of explain your background and kind of your resume. And don't be shy. Randy's a humble guy, but I don't want you to be humble here. I want you to talk about starting in the Marine Corps, going to the SEAL teams, all the awesome things.
Yeah, so graduated high school in 1994. Joined the Navy, was a Navy corpsman, and as a corpsman, I served with the Marines. So I wasn't actually a Marine. I was a corpsman serving with them. During that time, I got to become a Marine Corps martial arts instructor. Awesome. And yeah, that was pretty cool. So I did the old line training, and they'd come up with their new McMap program, and I got to do that. One of the few corpsmen to do that at the time, which was cool. But then September 11th happened. And I thought I'd miss a war of our generation, with the first Gulf War. I saw that in high school, watching it on the news. But when September 11th happened, that's when everything got real to me. And being Doc with the Marines was a good thing, right? It's very honorable. But when I thought about how I wanted to look back and tell my grandkids and my kids, hey, this is what grandpa or dad did, during the war of our generation. I wanted to say, hey, I served at the best of my ability. And that would have been in the SEAL teams. So I decided, and, September 11th happened. So I decided to go off to BUD/S. It took me a little while to make it, but I finally made it, and I was able to have several combat deployments during that time, where I learned a lot and gained some good experiences. My last 3 years in, I became the leading chief course and program manager in the Naval Special Warfare Combatives department. And during that time, I developed the combatives instructor course and updated the combatives course, which is what SEALs learn today in hand-to-hand combat. It really is the pinnacle of combatives for all of SOF, Special Operations Forces. And it was really cool to get to be part of that. There's a lot of things you have to do and be good at as a SEAL, but to be able to leave the community a little better than I found it, that little small piece of the pie, was very rewarding. Retired in 2016, became a firefighter for the city of San Diego. I'd really got into martial arts during my time at Combatives, earned my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu during that time. And, before, I was always in martial arts before. I used to do tough man competitions,
sure,
when I was younger, in my early 20s, before the UFC and all that. No skill, just brawling. But it was fun.
That's awesome.
So left San Diego Fire in 2022. COVID came to California and, all over, but California went crazy. So I decided to come back to Texas, where I was born and raised. During that time, ended up teaching jiu-jitsu full-time at a gym in Dallas. And then back in February, I decided to start my own company. I did it part-time in San Diego when I was there as a firefighter, but wanted to start doing it full-time again. It's called American Warrior Combatives. And I teach self-defense, hand-to-hand combat, mostly to civilians, men and women alike. Men that just want to help protect their families and their homes, and women that want to feel safer in the parking lot. I also teach tactical shooting. I've taught close quarters combat to SWAT teams. I've taught companies like how to have internal security to respond to active shooters. When I was with San Diego Fire, I came up with their combative patient program. So all along the realm of combatives, that's been kind of my niche for the last few years now.
Love it. Holy shit. Well, one time I was scared of riding on roller coasters, and I rode on it. So I think you and I are probably about equally as brave. Let me tell you how I met Randy. So, and then what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about kind of myth versus reality when it comes to both hand-to-hand combat and some gunfighting, as far as stateside and then overseas. But I'm a shooting instructor on the side, not to the level that Randy is, and I just do it kind of as a hobby. And for a while, I'd been doing Krav Maga, which is a martial arts form that was really developed by the Israeli military. It means contact combat in Hebrew. And it was designed to incapacitate people as quickly as possible. So it was okay. It was not a bad system, but not everything worked. And so I was sitting down with a buddy who's a former Navy SEAL, and we were having lunch, and I was telling him about that, and he goes, I need you to meet the man. And I said, is this Jesus? Who is the man? And he goes, his name's Randy. He just moved to Dallas. So I called Randy and basically said, I want you to teach me what you taught the SEAL teams. I want to learn to fight like a Navy SEAL for things that work hand to hand. I don't care how much it costs. I'll sell my house. I just want the opportunity to learn these things. And so I've been training with Randy for about 2 years, and I've done it both with the hand-to-hand side and with some of the tactical shooting side. So I'll just shamelessly promote his company. We'll throw it up on the website so you can contact him or whatever on this video. But it's American Warrior Combatives. And so he is the guy to talk to about this topic today. So before we get into the questions, I've got some back and forth questions for you. Just wanted to give a quick caveat that by being on the show today, although Randy and I probably agree on a lot of issues, by being on the show today, neither he nor his company are necessarily endorsing any other episodes on this podcast. They might. They're great episodes. I mean, I endorse all of them, but that please don't hold him responsible if I say something in another episode that is awful, that makes you hate him. Hate me instead. Okay. Today we're talking about myth versus reality, combat and fighting. Let's start with some questions related to hand-to-hand combat. So here's the first one. Do you think that martial arts will actually protect someone in a real street fight, and which ones are better practically than others? Because there's all kinds of different martial arts. Give me your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, will martial arts protect someone in a street fight? Well, I think some training is better than no training. Absolutely. And whatever is going to give someone confidence, more confidence in that situation, is a great thing. Now, when it comes to the different ones, absolutely, it matters.
Totally.
Right. So, you mentioned Krav Maga, and you kind of mentioned where you found some of the shortcomings of it. I took Taekwondo as a kid. I loved it. It will not help you in a street fight.
Yeah.
Period. And I'm almost 50. I can't kick anybody in the head right now. I'm pretty lucky to kick somebody in the knee.
Yeah.
So which ones do I think are the best? If I have one thing that I tell people to take other than training with me, right? Which
again, another promotion.
Again,
just train with Randy. Learn
would
how to
be my system. Well, I have
fine.
the video series, right? I have the video series on the website, but jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
What jiu-jitsu does is it makes you comfortable with the uncomfortable. You're in a lot of bad positions, and you learn to work your way through them. Now, it does have a couple of deficiencies. I think Muay Thai is really good as well. I think kids that grow up wrestling are extremely tough.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the grappling arts are the better arts. I think the striking arts, since, a lot of fights end up going to the ground, right, are great arts, right? Boxing, Muay Thai. But most of the fights that you see, and you can watch them on YouTube, and the ones that I've been in, we ended up kind of grappling with each other.
Yeah.
So the more comfortable you are with being engaged with somebody else up close and someone in your bubble, the better you are going to be prepared for that, and the more comfortable you are, and you can think your way through it.
Totally.
People can always get a lucky punch. When it comes to somebody being a boxer and somebody not being a boxer, the non-boxer can always get a lucky punch, right? However, when it comes to grappling, the better grappler always wins.
Okay.
There is no lucky grappling.
Yes.
They accidentally caught me in this.
Yeah.
No.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Super helpful, dude. Okay. So, does somebody need, how long should it take to learn a fighting system? Meaning you can go move to Tibet and you can spend 30 years learning Kung Fu and then get shot. But there are other systems. How long should it take to master one of these that you can use practically?
I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The average is somewhere between 8 and 12 years, depending on how long. That by no means should take you that long to learn how to defend yourself. I view viewing how to defend yourself a lot like swimming, right? How many swim lessons do you need to take before you can swim across a pool or swim across a lake?
Yeah.
There's only so many before you're like, all right, I got it. Now, if you want to be an Olympic level swimmer, that is a different story. If you want to be a competitor in Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu or boxing, you're going to have to do that for a long time. But just to learn to defend yourself against common criminal attacks, between 6 months and a year, and it doesn't have to be 3 days a week and all of that. And the more you do it, then the more space you can take in between just to go back and knock off the dust. Like how you and I trained. We started training once a week, sometimes twice a week, and now we train once a month.
Yeah.
You know, and we knock off the dust because there's only so many things that can really happen to you. You know, when we look at jiu-jitsu, there's like 100,000 moves.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, well, nobody can master all of those. So it shouldn't, 6 months to a year, you should be pretty good at being able to defend yourself, training once a week against common criminal attacks.
Yes. Awesome. Very good. Okay, so talk to me about, so MMA is really popular, UFC is really popular.
Yeah.
The benefit obviously is it takes different fighting styles and combines them. It takes the best of each school. But there's also some downfalls because at the end of the day, it's still a sport. And so talk to me, because I mean, if somebody has me in mount, in real life, what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch him in the wiener. You can't do that in UFC. And so talk to me about martial arts and sport versus what happens in real life. You have guns, you have knives, people have a buddy, they get a cheap shot. Talk to me about the sport aspect of martial arts versus a real street fight and the other variables.
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts. My system is made up of mixed martial arts, but with weapons and the ability to strike and knowing when and where we shouldn't strike. What is the gap? The gap is when you go into a cage, you only have to worry about one other person, and they're not going to pull a gun or a knife on you. Their buddy's not going to come run up and kick you in the head. You were talking about being in the mount, right? Well, if I had you in the mount, right, I would be winning, right? However, in a street fight, we're both kind of losing because my knees are getting messed up right on the ground, right? And I can't maintain situational awareness of what's going on behind me. So your buddy can come up and kick me in the back of the head, pull that knife, all these things, and even trying to punch. You know, you said you would punch somebody in the wiener if they were in a mount. You know, that's even tough to do if somebody's got you mounted. So you got to have some other techniques to be able to do that. They're probably
not me, dude. I have one move, just wiener punches, 100%. That's my only move.
Yeah,
all right.
Please don't tell me that. We've been training together for 2 years.
That wasn't. I didn't get that from Randy. That's just something. I'm creating my own system. It's very effective.
Yeah, like Master Ken, right? Stomp that growing.
That's right.
But yeah, that's what MMA doesn't address. It doesn't address the multiple attacker. You know, they're on a mat. It doesn't address the concrete. And there's certain things we're not allowed to do in MMA that, you know, we can do. You know, we can't hit the back of the head, neck, or spine. Right?
Yep.
And, you know, I've taught you to drop elbows certain places that will incapacitate somebody.
Totally.
So, you know, I think it's the best as far as being the closest to mimic it, you know, if somebody else is going to train, but you have to see where the gaps are. You have to realize that.
I love it. Super helpful. Okay, talk to me about this. So most fights go to the ground. This is the benefit of jiu-jitsu and BJJ.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
And this is also why a lot of police officers do it, because they're rolling around on the ground. It can be non-lethal or it could be lethal if you need it to be. Do you want fights to go to the ground? A lot of them do, but is that ideal, or do you want to get off the ground? What are your thoughts? In a real fight, what are you trying to do?
I only take the fight to the ground if I absolutely have to.
Okay.
You know, I mentioned it already. I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. However, I can only grapple one grown man at a time. And if I take my focus off him, I lose situational awareness of everything else going on around me. There are certain situations and positions I have to be in. I have no choice but to take the fight to the ground because I'm in such a bad position. But I want to get back to my feet as soon as I can, or put them in a control position that's not the mount.
Yes.
All right.
Good call.
A different position, one that I teach in my video series. But I try to avoid the ground. And, you know, as far as law enforcement, everybody else taking to the ground, like, a lot of times they're messing with homeless people. They're messing with all kinds of other people. The more we're engaged in this grappling, this ground fight, the more you can bite my face, the more you can spit in my face. A lot of times people, you know, got piss and shit and they're covered in everything else. And you're wrestling somebody, you know, for law enforcement. You know, when I was a firefighter in San Diego, like, we had to deal with homeless all the time. The last place I wanted to be in a homeless encampment was rolling around on the damn ground. Sure. Right. Yeah. That seems like the last thing I want in life. You know, and you can't deal with anyone else coming up with you on the ground. I could have you the best rear naked choke ever with my hooks in, and when your buddy comes up and stomps my head in, right, didn't matter. I was making you pass out. Now I'm dead. Yes.
Yikes.
So
okay. Stay off the ground. Deal. I want to hear a little bit about the system that you helped to develop for the teams. Because, we always we go rifle, then we go sidearm, then we go knife, then we go hands. That's kind of how that procedure goes in combat. But some of the things that you originally taught, you found didn't work well overseas. But you're one of the few guys I know not only that knows the hand-to-hand stuff here, but used it overseas.
Yes.
And so talk a little bit about your experience, and then talk about the program you helped develop for the Navy. Because you'd even mentioned to me having like buds dropouts, put them in riot gear, let them attack you. Chat with me about the system that you developed.
Yeah. So I had been in some real life hand-to-hand fights downrange. One of the things I tell my SEALs, and going through the program, is first and foremost, we're American gunfighters. We solve our problems with smart tactics, weapons, and teamwork. And then the unlikely event, my weapon's down, or my buddy's fighting his own fight where he can't help me, I better have some damn fight skills. However, the enemy and Murphy always get a vote, as in Murphy's Law.
Totally.
Right? In every situation. And even though, we're not supposed to do one-man room entries, even though I'm always supposed to have a buddy there, shit just happens sometimes.
Totally.
And I'd found myself in a couple of situations where I was fighting for my life, literally like on the movie Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, where the guy's got the knife leaning over him. Yeah.
And the program, or the system that was currently in the SEAL teams, if I had done what they had taught me to do, I would have died. Yeah. I would have been dead. I didn't even have a chance to use it anyways before I was already on the ground wrestling with this guy. And that happened to me, like I said, it happened to me 3 times, which is actually a lot for a SEAL. Yeah. It's, again, we try not to have these things happen, but like I said, the enemy and Murphy always get a vote. So I became very, very passionate about combatives after that, because I got through it off sheer willpower. And that's literally what saved my life. It wasn't anything I knew. It was just pure not wanting to die and being scared. Yeah. So once I had come back off this deployment where this had happened, I took Krav Maga. I started training mixed martial arts. I started taking all these kind of other things, just trying to figure out, all right, next time I'm in this, how the hell am I going to survive it? And, through God's grace, as I progressed through the teams and, increased in rank, I became the chief of combatives, and I got put in a position where I'm like, okay, now I can actually make something worthwhile. So what I did was I spent a year bringing in professional MMA fighters and coaches, putting them in full kit, going to different combatives and self-defense courses all over the country, sending the staff that worked underneath me all over the country, coming back and just developing this thing. Like, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And the reason I was able to come up with something so good and so effective was, like you mentioned, I was able to go get guys that quit buds. It's called X Division. And these guys are studs. They just didn't make it through buds for some reason. And so I would always have one of my guys, I'm like, go give me the biggest, toughest, strongest looking guys you can find. And he'd go pick them up. We'd pick up like 15 guys, and we'd put them in full protective gear. And we would just have them come at us as hard as they could. And I gave them like 2 rules. Hey man, try not to hit me in the nuts and try not to gouge me in the eyes. Yeah. All right. Other than that, go for it. Yeah. And
we're going to do that in a second. I'm going to have you attack the cameraman. Sorry, keep going.
So everything was pressure tested, and pressure tested to the max. It had to, because I was responsible for the SEAL teams. And if I taught some young SEAL a skill, and he went downrange, and he did it the way I taught him, not some weird fucked up way, but the way I taught him, and it didn't work, well, that was on me. That was my responsibility. And that's how serious I took that job. So I was a guinea pig for all of it. Yeah. Because at the time I was older, right? For a SEAL, I was at the end of my career, and I'm like, okay, well, if this old man can do it, all right, then these young bucks can definitely do it. And it was the most fun I had in the SEAL teams. It was great, but I took it very serious. It took me about a year. I didn't do it all by myself. I had, some pro coaches come in, and I put them in full kit. and, show them like, hey, this is what I'm in. This is what I have to operate in. And they're like, and most of them are like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. How do you guys do anything? Right. Yeah. So it's, because a kit can be, it can be your best weapon, or it can be used to get, literally your worst nightmare, because you're covered in handles. Oh, yeah. Right. And if somebody gets like, think about having a helmet on.
Oh, yeah. You can choke someone with their helmet or their plate carrier.
Yeah.
You can
fingers through the chin strap.
Totally.
Like you're taking my head like a steering wheel.
Yeah.
So, these things, they had to work. They, a SEAL's life was literally in my hands if they didn't work, and I took responsibility for that. So, a lot of other, you're like, why, was this so serious, and how come other people, what's the difference between yours and others? Most people don't pressure test to that level.
Yeah.
They can't pressure test to that level. They don't have the dummies to do it.
Yeah.
I got lucky. I had the people, and I had young studs do that. Additionally, I didn't have a dog in the fight. I didn't care about my system. I didn't have a system. I was developing a system. So I wasn't trying to sell something to somebody.
Totally.
Right? Like, hey, this is my...
Yeah, when you have your karate gym, you've got to push karate.
You've got... Yeah. So I wasn't making techniques or forcing techniques to work against... predetermined attacks.
Yes.
It was random attacks by people that just came at me as hard as they could. And if it worked, it worked. If it didn't work, it didn't. Hey, we're not using that one. Yes. Cool. We're using
I love it. And that's something that you taught me. A lot of martial arts, what they do is there's just static training.
Yes.
So here's a knife. They kind of stick it out. You slap it out of their hand. Well, in real life, they're going to keep trying to stab you, and they're moving backwards, and it's a sewing machine. And so you have to have things that will work.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Okay, I want to do this. I want to transition a little bit now, just to moving from hand to hand to combat overseas. Some myths versus reality when it comes to gunfights, being in combat. There's an author I really like. I don't know your thoughts on him. Most guys like him that are in your space. His name's Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, former Army Ranger, and he taught psychology at West Point. And so he's written On Killing, On Combat, a bunch of other books. His big press is what the body does psychologically in combat. So talk to me a little bit about when you're downrange, when you're in a firefight, are you able to think clearly? What happens with your heart rate? What happens with tunnel vision? Talk to me about what the body does under extreme stress.
So I was very fortunate. I always put myself there mentally before I ever got into those situations. Okay. So I was very lucky. I always performed the way I wanted to in combat. Now, we train very hard as SEALs. And sometimes that training, I was stressed out in training. I got some of the things you were talking about, right? For me, it was cotton mouth.
Okay.
Like when I was stressed, like we would go do these house runs, right? And as you go in these houses, you don't want to get safety violations, right? And there's going to be unknowns in there, and there's going to be people with guns, and you can't shoot any of the unknowns, and you got to do everything right, and you can get safety violations. And so it's, you're worried about that. And for me, I would get cotton mouth, and my mouth would dry up, and I wouldn't be able to really talk. So that was my extreme stress, but I got that out during training.
Got it.
And when I was downrange, since I had always put myself kind of there mentally before, and I got the stress out during training, I always performed the way I wanted to. So I was very lucky. I have seen some people freeze up.
Yep.
When we were ambushed a few times. And it was surprising to me because we practiced being ambushed, all the time in training. Like the majority of training, everything went south.
Right.
Right. So we learned to fight through everything going south. But I was very fortunate that way. And I always performed the way I wanted to. It's something else too that would happen to me in training is that front sight focus, right? We talk about front sight focus when we're shooting, but then we get so I call it getting mud sucked, right? Get so mud sucked into this one problem. I can't open up my aperture to see what else is going on around me. Fortunately, it happened to me as a new guy when I was training, and I was able to get that out of my system then, and I didn't have anything happen to me in combat that way. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so and again, you correct me if I'm wrong here, because I ride in planes, but you jump out of planes, so it's different. The things I've heard with the body going through extreme stress in combat, one is tunnel vision, so you have to scan around because you can't see your peripheral vision very well. Auditory exclusion, you have trouble hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, even police officers that have been in shootings sometimes report not even hearing their guns go off. Heart rate jumps up super high. You lose, fine motor skills. You only have gross motor skills. Grossman mentions that 1/4 of all men in combat admit to crapping their pants. So nobody teaches you how to fight in sloshy jeans. My question is, with that in mind, how should you train with the fire? I see a lot of guys that are very flashy, a lot of like YouTube warriors, and they're doing these flashy, very technical moves, and it's the coolest way to, reload your AR or whatever.
Yeah.
But is all that, how simple does it need to be? What are your thoughts?
I stay away from flashy things. In my self-defense, you train with me, I stay away from flashy techniques. I stay away from flashy things with the weapons. I'm very big on magazine changes and dealing with malfunction drills, and things that look good on YouTube videos don't always, have applicability in reality. It looks cool. I mean, look at John Wick.
Oh my gosh!
It's
I just
awesome.
want to shoot somebody underwater and then back up so their bullets don't hit me, kind of like he does. But none of it. It's ridiculous.
So it looks cool, but in reality, the applicability is very limited. And we used to have this thing in the SEAL teams. Of course, we think we're better than everybody else because we're SEALs, and that's what we tend to think. But we say we're better than everybody else, not because we have advanced techniques, but because we do the basics better.
Yes, the fundamentals.
So
everything. Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, so with that in mind, are there any things that you were taught and then you go overseas that just did not work when it comes to gunfighting, where you were taught do this and you think, man, I need to be doing the opposite of that. That's going to get me killed?
Not when it came to gunfighting. That was the opposite. One of the things I teach in my course is very up close shooting.
Yeah.
The first time I did extreme up close shooting was the first time I ever had to do it in combat.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things I'm big on my course. The majority of the shooting we do, from rifle to pistol transitions in the teams, is at 7 yards. So rarely are we inside 7 yards, but inside the house, you're definitely inside 7 yards. But when we go inside the house, right, we're not taking up close shots to paper. And when we have opposing forces, we're using simunition rounds, but we have a rule. Hey, if they're within 10 feet, we just say bang, 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 because we don't want to mess, up the role players within 10 feet from a simunition round. So the first time I'd ever fired my weapon, literally framing on someone, was downrange.
Yeah.
And the percussion I felt off of that was surprising. I never, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So now when I teach my courses, I have people frame on the target and shoot from the hip, because I want them to experience that, because most self-defense attacks happen within 7 to 10 feet. There's no guarantee you're not going to be taking that shot.
Right.
With literally them on top of you. Yeah. Or definitely within one arm's length.
Sure.
And if you haven't experienced that and know what that feels like, it's very surprising.
Yeah.
So that was something that was, there's nothing I learned in training that I was like, oh, this is going to get me killed. Yeah. Because one thing we do great in the SEAL teams is we're constantly adapting. Yeah. Right. I mean, we get after action reports currently from the battle space, and then the platoons that are going through their next workup are getting that information. So, but I think that's one of the things we do the fastest. Team 6 is probably the fastest on it, but that their information goes right down into the other SEAL teams. Yeah. And it's really cool. When I was with the Marines, and I've done enough Army courses that it takes them forever to change anything. Sure. We adapt and change on the fly all the time. Yeah. And that was pretty cool about being a SEAL.
That's awesome. Okay, well, let me ask one more question then about specifically, talk to me about some of the differences, the way that SEALs are trained, especially when it comes to gunfighting, that's different than other soft units or even infantry in general. I mean, you and I, we joke about this a lot with, you know, a high ready or a low ready with a rifle and where to put gear on our plate carriers and all that. So, but give me some generals of, because you guys are very elite. What are some things that are different that you guys do versus other SOF units?
Well, you know, you're talking about the high ready versus the low ready. I think SF is finally going to the high ready now when they're going into the house, which is great.
Yeah.
But we've been doing that for years. And because the low ready, it just leads to people muzzle striking each other.
Just to be real quick, what we're talking about is when you have a rifle and you're going into combat, whether it's, you know, CQB, CQC, depending on what branch you're in, whether the muzzle is pointed up, avoiding your teammates, or down, avoiding your teammates. The SEALs are the only ones that do up. Sorry, keep going.
Well, I think some SF, I think SF units are switching.
Yeah.
But for years, you know, when you're talking about basic infantry guys, you know, the majority of the runs that people do inside a shoot house, the instructors are up in the catwalk. So they would have everyone that come through, since they were, you know, teaching regular Army people and literally
I don't want to get shot if I'm
everyone else, right? So they made everyone do the low ready. And to me, it's a recipe for disaster. You know, in the SEAL teams, we do high ready because we trust our people.
Sure.
Right? If I'm following the full weapon safety rules, my finger's straight off the trigger until ready to fire. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not pointing at anybody I don't intend to shoot.
Yeah.
So we trust our people not to do that. That was probably one of the biggest things that I saw between the different SOF units was just the way we did CQC, and, you know, and they call it CQB. I will caveat it with this. There's more than one way to skin cats.
Sure.
Right? And, you know, the Army and the Marine Corps way of doing CQB has killed a lot of terrorists.
Sure.
And so has the SEAL teams.
Sure.
So in the way we do things, I just prefer the way we do things. I've looked at both. I've seen both. And just the way that we do it just logically makes way more sense to me.
I love it. All right, let's do this because we're coming up on time. I just want to encourage you, if you're wanting training, obviously, I'm just going to shamelessly promote Randy. It is the best hand-to-hand training you can get, and then there's also the tactical side. So again, American Warrior Combatives. Any other final comments you want to give? So if you could share a piece of advice for somebody interested in pursuing hand-to-hand combatives, pursuing tactical shooting, obviously training with you, do you have one piece of advice though that could be helpful that they might need to think through, and then we'll call it a day?
Yes. Make it reality-based.
Okay.
Like whenever you're training, think about what would an attacker be doing to me right now, and how would I address that? You know, you've trained with me a lot, and I always say, hey, we're always going to pretend two things. First, we're on camera.
Yeah.
Second, there's more than one attacker. You know, I'm big on the magazine changes, right?
Totally.
Because people always think, oh, it's only one attacker. Oh, I won't have to shoot to cover. Oh, I won't have to do this. If people, whether they're doing self-defense training or tactical firearms training, pretend you're on camera, you're being recorded, and some DA is going to come judge everything you do.
Sure.
And always pretend that there's more than one attacker. And you do those two things, you're going to be doing all right.
Awesome. Love it. Randy, thank you so much for letting me interview you. Thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for tuning in to Ideological. We're going to have another episode with Randy where we talk about mental toughness and what life is like in the SEAL team. So thanks for joining us today. And Randy, thanks for being on.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Awesome.